Hey, good morning. It's Friday morning. It's obviously time for Hollywood Breaks. Welcome, Keith.
Hello,
Good
kid.
to see you.
Good to be seen.
Okay, listen, Wolverine. That's like a
Oh yeah.
seriously awesome movie that you have going on there. The marketing campaign. What's funny is when I first saw you this morning, you were like this big on my screen, but I still knew right away that's a Wolverine poster.
Yeah, it's an iconic image. It's one of my favorite, and designed for us by Art Machine and BLT.
Oh
And
wait, hold on. You actually know the artist. You're
I
being a
know.
homer nowadays.
I see. I knew you were going to ask me, so I prepped. I
Of
prepped him.
course.
I do my homework.
Someone did a
Oh, I was a
beautiful
good
piece of
student.
art. You need to know who did the art, Keith. You need to know that.
Well, okay, fine. Now I do. So I'm learning.
I love it.
Life is it's a lifelong learning. You know what I mean?
So Art Machine and BLT. Awesome. Yeah.
Art
Love
Machine
those guys.
BLT contributed to this one. I believe this was original Tony Sella idea, if I'm not mistaken. So, it was just, it's such an iconic image, as you said, and it really was a fun marketing campaign to work on. It was stressful as I'll get out, but
Sure.
as most of them are. But it was still a lot of fun, and we had a lot of great images to play with. The movie, unfortunately, wasn't I think up to snuff, but luckily I think those mistakes were corrected with Deadpool and Logan. So
Yeah.
the canon of the Fox Marvel universe was somewhat saved in future installments. But still, working on this campaign, and I love
I
that
swear
person.
you still bleed Fox true and true. You're worried about the Fox
I mean,
canon.
listen, I yes, I do. I mean, it was such a. I mean, this is the way I encapsulate my career. Um, you know, I started at New Line Cinema, which was basically my film school, because you get exposed to so much at that company because Bob Shea was an entrepreneur and sort of a wild cowboy of the industry, and he really shook it up. And
He did.
it was a great experience for me, and because from the assistants on up, you really were involved in every process. He didn't care about titles; it just didn't matter. It was just we were working to make great stuff. And then I
Yeah.
went from there to Fox, into Fox marketing, under Tom Rothman and Tony Sella and Pam Levine and all those guys. And that was sort of like my marketing boot camp. And I learned more probably in the sort of 5-6 years that, or almost 9 years that I was there, than I probably would have learned 10 years anywhere else.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you have to know you're one of the most premier people on the planet just to be in the realm, in the department with those folks.
Yeah.
Some of the breakthroughs that they did and obvious attentions that they got for films.
Yeah.
Um,
And I got an opportunity to work with some great people. I mean, that was, even despite all the stresses of working on some of these movies, my colleagues were just really great people to work with. And you kind of have to have really great people to work with because you're basically with them a week.
they
So
are your family.
if they're not nice people, then it's really, really difficult to
Yeah, right.
show up to work every day. But yeah, I mean, I said a silent prayer this week because Building 88, for those of you who don't know the Fox lot, is the iconic 20th Century Fox lot, building for theaters. It's where all the famous executives were, Zucker and all those guys were there. And now it's no longer a film building. It's become, apparently the Murdochs are gutting it and turning it into a Fox TV building. And all my former colleagues who were there are now over in Nakatomi Tower, also known as Fox Plaza. So I had a lot of great memories in '88, and now it's no longer a film building.
Yeah,
So
it's amazing, huh?
rest
But
in
this
peace.
is why you are our Hollywood insider. I think it's the connections that you make and kind of the true blood idea of what Hollywood is about.
Yeah.
You obviously knew it in a certain era that it was growing, expanding, and the great people that you met
Yeah.
are really our other insiders. We're just tapping on all the people and all the network that you've built over the years to figure this thing out. So, all right, here's the question I have for you this week. Are you ready
Oh,
to
I'm
pay
ready.
more for Netflix because Netflix is rising their prices?
Yep.
It's obviously a show. Probably it's somewhat scheduled, but it's obviously a show. Maybe to Wall Street to show that they're um, getting more serious and trying to raise more money. I don't think they're short of subscribers, although we don't really know that part of it. but it does seem like it's time to raise the prices. Do you think they're running out of money because their content needs better financing to make better content for us to consume?
I don't think they're running out of money, because I think your point is well taken, that they're Wall Street darling. I mean, Wall Street loves them some Netflix. I think this is the reality. They can't, I mean, we don't really know their financials. We know that they're getting, they have a lot of cash based on, the low interest rates and all that kind of stuff. But eventually the bill's going to come due. And I think they're prepping for that. And they're also realizing they have a lot more competition out in the landscape now. You've got, Disney Plus, HBO Max, Peacock. You've got all these competitors now that are sort of really, asserting themselves in the marketplace now, especially in the era of the pandemic. So I think they're recognizing that. And I think something that doesn't always go acknowledged is a vast majority of their shows are still owned by other companies. So it's not necessarily that Netflix owns everything outright. So I think the idea is that they would love to be able to own some of their own content outright and not necessarily be so reliant on other people's content. And they want to sort of be able to own everything wholly and just be an original Netflix production.
Yeah, I mean, arguably some of the best content on Netflix is not owned by them. They're really a great platform for the long tail, where shows that aren't seen on regular broadcast schedule because they compete with other timelines, they can put it on Netflix. It has a very deep pocket of content and can find the niche audience that you're looking for, especially using algorithms to push things to the top.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely something that they need to, take into consideration, because so many, like I said, so many of their shows are produced somewhere else. Like, for example, I think Umbrella Academy is produced by NBC Universal, and Cobra Kai is produced by Sony Pictures. Yeah. So there's still that sort of traditional.
Cobra Kai was originally on YouTube. I mean, it was created first, had one audience, and then Netflix was able to build a bigger audience for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also it's what they call sort of the Netflix effect. That in some aspects, Netflix also sort of boosts shows that otherwise may have languored elsewhere.
Sure. Like Schitt's Creek, totally.
Yeah, Schitt's Creek, which really found its audience, which also led to its Emmy sweep, which we've discussed previously. And then you look at Cobra Kai, which is on YouTube Red, which has now found a home on Netflix, and also You, which was on Lifetime, and now all of a sudden is like a huge hit for Netflix. So I think there's a lot of things happening here, but I also think Netflix still wants to start owning a lot of its own content and creating its own content. And I think the reality is that they're going to need to bump the prices every now and then. I don't think they're not huge bumps, but at the same time, I think it's an acknowledgement from Netflix that we still need to have a lot of money, because we still have to churn out a lot of content to remain competitive now with all these other players getting into the game.
Yeah, it's what's interesting to me is that they're raising their prices when Peacock comes out, and half of Peacock, or who knows how many of their viewers are subscriptions or free. Mm-hmm. But you would think that in the competitive marketplace with the new platforms coming out, Netflix would have done the opposite, make sure that they retained people instead of raised the prices. But maybe obviously Reed Hastings and the team knows what they're doing. They've played these price hike games before.
Yeah, and I don't think they do it. It's not something they do willy-nilly. They definitely think through it and they strategize. And I'm sure, like you said, Reed definitely and his team definitely have sort of a process of how they're going to roll these out over the course of how many years. But again, I think it's just an acknowledgement that we need that money. We need to start producing more content, and they've made some really lavish deals over the course of the last few years with Ryan Murphy and whatnot. And I think they're really okay, we need to make sure that we have the money to keep funding these projects and keep bringing things in here, and really making us sort of the not first stop for anyone who's interested in being on the platform. And I think that's really
I'm still somewhat of a skeptic. Might be too much of a pragmatist, but the reality that they're doing something and losing money, they're not even playing the same game that other people are doing.
No, I mean they're not. I mean it's I mean we still don't really know their metrics of viewers. Like they keep
Right.
changing. Like at first it was like 2 minutes. If you watch it for 2 minutes, then it counts as a view. And that's not the same metrics that people who work in theatrical, when the business was, up and running, or in even TV. That's not how or linear TV. That's not how they talk about this stuff. It's not, oh, I watched 2 minutes of the latest movie so that my ticket sales count. No, that's not how it works. And we don't really have a full understanding of their financials. We don't really understand how much debt they have. I imagine it's quite hefty, but who knows? We don't know any of that. But that doesn't seem to bother those on Wall Street who invest, because Netflix is such a dominant player. And they were really the first ones out of the gate to really get this, model up and running and to be a success at it.
Yeah, but it's they had the ability to build it from the ground up, which is kind of different than if you had an existing content platform.
Right.
Here's I'm gonna move on to the next topic, because you sent me this text message about 2 days ago.
Oh, yeah.
And it's it was the article for the Sony Pictures realignment, which is very cool. But what you said was, I talked to my buddy at Disney and they still don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So there seems to be some kind of obviously shift in Hollywood that's taking place, where these large studios are basically realigning their platforms to go through one funnel. So they're saying, here's a piece of content. We're going to be platform agnostic in our thinking. We're going to find the best distribution for that content, maybe before it's made or after it's made, or based on the ability to react to the market with the COVID process happening. But what's really happening is that when you start funneling people through one channel, marketing's going to change too. Like you're going to have one person deciding what platform it's going to be on, and therefore deciding who's going to work on it.
Yeah, that's
a huge shift for people, especially if your buddy at Disney is still wondering what his job's going to be, or her job. I don't know which one it is. We're not going to give away who you're talking to.
Not keeping my hand.
But we do know that there's the reality of something that's happening, and it's happening at the big studio space. So, inside and out, people are wondering how this is really going to play itself out over time.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So, I'll kind of give a sort of overview of what happened. So, Sony Pictures Entertainment has combined basically their theatrical home entertainment and TV distribution marketing all under one sort of content umbrella. So they basically, Josh Greenstein, who was sort of the head of theatrical and home entertainment marketing, and Keith Lagoy, who was the head of their distribution, global or TV distribution marketing, are sort of the head of this new operation. So they're putting it all under one sort of umbrella. So it's basically a content marketing hub. And, I think what this is a sign of is that, one, Sony's acknowledging that habits are changing, things are shifting, but also that content marketing is content marketing. Now, that's not to say that there aren't some expertise that come from each channel that you're marketing. For example, there is an expertise to cutting a trailer that you're not necessarily going to get, especially for a film trailer versus a TV show trailer.
30 versus
there's different expertise models here. And the involvement of Paul Noble and Daniel Misher, who oversee global theatrical marketing, they're also a big part of this reorg. They're going to be sort of running it and reporting up into Josh and Keith. So I think that acknowledges that theatrical marketing and the philosophy of it and the skills involved in selling a global campaign in the theatrical model still has value, and the skills are there. But it also acknowledges that, from a sort of a cost perspective, you're going to save money if you've just sort of put everybody under one hub, and there's sort of one strategy and one sort of idea behind pushing out your marketing materials and how best to reach your audience.
I'll be honest, I think there's going to be a huge learning curve for many of the teams that are out there, because I think there's like theory, I was really good at film, so therefore I'll be really easy at any platform or whatever. And in reality, the different viewers on different platforms really does make a difference. How you get the information out there, how do you create engagement, how soon between when I watch the marketing piece and I can actually watch a piece of content. In a trailer, basically it's a small feature because I'm watching it 2 or 3 months before the content's even available.
Yeah.
Where you're doing something on TV or OTT platform, I can watch that promotion and then click right away. So very different promotion, very different need for each of those. Not to mention the direct to consumer elements of some of these marketing pieces. Like I can hit up, instead of sending out a kind of a global piece and hoping the demographics attached to it, a women's film, urban film, whatever the kind of demographics are that when they make the content, now they can directly market and even create more content. So I can see the need to merge the departments and create a global strategy for each piece of content. But I think it's going to be, I think some of us fans of film marketing and TV marketing are going to be a little disappointed. I think there's going to be a learning curve that we're going to kind of miss some of the glory days of.
Yeah, I think it's also, you know, they're reacting to sort of how things are in the current marketplace, and your viewer habits are changing. But, you know, I was talking to one of my contacts yesterday, and, you know, she brought up a really great point in terms of like, well, you know, I think the last time there was like this sort of pandemic feeling was like the Spanish flu in 1918, 1919. And then we had the Roaring 20s, where everyone was just sort of having a great old time. So are we headed to something like that once we get through this pandemic, to the point where people are going to want to go back to the theaters and really just get that experience back because they've been trapped in their house for 2 years or whatever it ends up being, that they really want to go back to that? So does that shift the model back to sort of the traditional theatrical marketing? And because you're right, like a trailer, it's anticipated. When there's an anticipated movie and it's a trailer runs or during a Super Bowl or during a, you know, high viewed event, that's a big deal. But where a TV show, nobody really watches a trailer for a TV show. It's not something that really captures people's minds. I mean, the one that I can think of off the top of my head that was so relevant that really helped launch the show was the This Is Us trailer, which was very well received and was one of the highest viewed TV show trailers ever. But that's an outlier compared to sort of what happens in sort of theatrical space. So there'll definitely be interesting to see how this shift happens. I think the combination of all these heads is a little top heavy. So I think there's going to definitely be some bake off, if you will, happening here. And it'll be interesting to see who ends up winning out, because that could lead to what sort of the strategic objectives and how they best approach each piece of content. You can imagine that if it's Josh, that he's, you know, his history is in theatrical. So that may be where he starts to pull things if he ends up, you know, ultimately being the one guy who runs the show. But if it leans more towards Keith, then maybe he'll be more on sort of his TV instincts. And so it's definitely a lot of learning, but I think it's headed in sort of the direction I think where the industry as a whole is headed. And it'll definitely be interesting to see how this sort of affects other departments and other companies and the other media companies. If they're like, oh, well, this is what we were thinking, let's see how this goes. You know, I think Disney is definitely watching this with interest for sure. And my buddy's comment in terms of we don't really know what this means, I think really puts the pressure on Disney for this December Wall Street presentation on what this reorg means. Because then we're going to get a lot more detail in terms of what that looks like, how they're reorganizing the whole department. Because the way they made the announcement, it seemed like all the studio was going to be like a movie content hub, theatrical content hub, and then, you know, the network or the TV place was going to be TV content. But where does that leave marketing and distribution? So that was sort of like the big question. And so I think that's why December is going to be sort of even more of an eye opener for us looky-loos watching Disney from afar.
Often what happens when these studios make these big shifts, though, too, is that a lot of the marketing and help actually goes outsourced, because everything's being moved. People are grabbing their favorites or trying not to play favorites. Sometimes they try to bring it all in-house, and that really, a lot of studios struggle when they do that because there are very limited resources to experiment with. So a little bit of a boom to outside vendors, and when some of this reorg happens, because it really needs to keep on making content. They don't have a choice, but the internal issues and internal fighting can create opportunities for others. So we might see another kind of big boom out in the field where for many months that group's been shut down. You know, like when the pandemic hit, they sucked everyone in house as fast as possible.
And
stopped doing that.
Yeah, I mean, there's still like Universal still does a lot of their own stuff. They do have an in-house team. They never really got rid of it. Disney has an organization which is called the Hive, I believe, which is their in-house marketing department. Netflix has an in-house team too, but there's still a lot of work going outside, to other vendors. So yeah, I think you're right. I think this is because there's gonna be so much happening at the same time that you're gonna need more than just sort of your in-house team to handle it. You're gonna need sort of the outside vendors as well. So that, I mean, it's a good sign for them. The flip side of that, to play devil's advocate, would potentially be that every executive has their favorites. And if one executive is sort of put in charge, they're going to go to their favorite vendor all the time. And that may be a short riff for the sort of the smaller vendors who don't necessarily, win on every single project and don't get regular projects, but just get all the little small projects throughout the whole studio. And if you combine all the operations into one umbrella, that lessens the opportunity out there.
Yeah, especially with layoffs. Hopefully you bet on the right horse when the time comes, and your person makes it, and the other person, other group doesn't.
I mean, I think, and I think to your layoff point, right now they're saying Sony only had like 35 layoffs, but I don't know if that's the end. I think you're going to see more as they combine operations. There's going to be more shift in like, well, who's going to run all the creative marketing, who's going to be cutting all the materials. So it'll be interesting to see how the shift continues. And I think they're also going to be learning as this process goes on.
And we have a lot of friends in that field, so we'll be paying attention to that and seeing what that's going on. But I know a lot of people are waiting to see what happens there, or even more, jumping over to Netflix to make sure that that's secure, because Netflix is still producing content like crazy. Okay, NBC Youth, they came out with their first numbers on Peacock, 22 million. It seems like a pretty good start for Peacock. Interesting, it's a platform that's pay or free. So curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because they didn't really discuss the whether or not the breakout of the numbers, whether or not how much of it was free and how much of it was paid, because there are basically 3 tiers for Peacock. There's the free option, which gives you all commercials. There's this is the option I have, which is like $5 a month, and you get limited commercials. And then there's $10 a month, which is like no commercials. So we don't know the breakout. We don't know what the breakout looks like, and who's paying, who isn't. Still, it's a nice number. Don't get me wrong. I think the other side of that coin, though, is that at the same time they're announcing 22 million subscribers, they also cancel one of their more pricier new originals, Brave New World, which some estimates have it was like $100 million show, which is insane for a TV show. So it's interesting because, okay, they got 20 million subs, but what originals do they have that are still going to be like, because it seems to me that you got Netflix is like the king, and so they've got all their shows. And then Disney Plus, yes, they had Hamilton, yes, they have Mandalorian, but at the same time, a lot of their viewing is still the classic library content. But that's content, and that's a library that expands generations. Like, I can sit and watch with Robin Hood, the original, with my kids, but they're going to want to watch Frozen 2 50 times over. And like, that's not, you go to the other platforms like HBO Max, they had their West Wing reunion, which obviously helped their subs slightly, a little bit. But what's Peacock's original? And Peacock doesn't really have a library that inspires sort of like cross-generational excitement to the point where like Disney Plus, where they can sort of rely on that library and still sort of work out what their content strategy is going to be in their original strategy, where now Peacock needs to figure out whether or not they're going to go on that route and sort of focus on like originals. They've got a lot of library titles that are buzzworthy. For example, my wife and I have been watching Friday Night Lights all over again. So
you love that Friday Night Lights, Keith.
Oh, I love me some Friday
Night Lights. I think you just love Peacock because you could finally watch Friday Night Lights.
If somehow Peter Berg watches this, dude, the Panthers won their first title in 2006. 2021, 15-year reunion. Bring everybody back on the field. what he's at.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Start
telling
making
you,
the marketing for it now, Keith. You can get the rally.
it writes itself. I mean, come on. Who doesn't want to celebrate the Dillon Panthers? I mean, really. Anyway, but that's what they have to start thinking about. Like, are we going to lean more towards originals, or are we going to, for example, you brought this up earlier, are we going to compete with Netflix, sort of finding those shows that may be able to find traditional on linear TV and sort of poaching some of those and bring them new life?
I mean, seriously, right? You have Netflix is proving that to make original content doesn't always win. You can just go find the good content and curate that. It's NBC. That's what they've been doing for like 100 years, is curating good content, finding content makers and distributing it. And some of the best on the planet over the ages have been right there on NBC Universal pieces. Why not keep up with success and instead of trying to finance original content when there are plenty of studios out there making it, and they can still kind of win the long tail model. I guess for me, like they need some piece of notoriety though to separate them. Really with them as a player now, and I'm so curious on how these numbers work. You have, let's see, HBO Max says they have 40 million subscribers. Disney has over 60 million subscribers. Netflix has over almost 200 million subscribers. Now Peacock has 22 million subscribers. That's a lot of people trying to figure out where to watch their show. Yeah. And we're not even talking about YouTube and Snapchat and all, all these other kind of distraction medias that are out there. It's the navigation of where to find the show. So I know Friday Night Lights is on Peacock. It's worth the subscription, and I know I'm going to start there. And maybe that's, they start with a good piece there, and then they get to watch secondary media, so you stay on their platform. But there's a lot of small little bills that people are paying on their credit card every month, and you're gonna have to keep up with it, or I can imagine the drops happening pretty.
I think there's gonna be a lot of churn. To be frank, I'm considering dropping Peacock, because once we're done with Friday Night Lights, why do we still need it? Like, and I think that's what a lot of what's going to happen is you're going to just have churn. Like, you're going to have churn where people sign up when the shows are good, and then they just let it lapse in a month. Now the thing that the other side of that is, well, okay, but if you subscribe through Apple, for example, it automatically just bills, like, and then you just lose track of it. You're just like, oh. And it's
I think that's what a lot of people depend on. Like, honestly, I have YouTube TV, and when I really want to watch a show, it's somewhat like the old TiVo days. Like, you can just watch the show. It's on demand on YouTube TV. Yeah. But to your point, I've had it for a few months and forgot I had it until the World Series. And then I was like, well, yeah, oh wait, I can watch this right now. Even though I'm in Florida, I can tune into this thing. Yep. So there's opportunities, I think, for everyone to kind of lose the content too. Like, if everyone has infinite content, then really the navigation part of it's going to be very difficult. And as we point out many times, the what to watch problem really becomes the problem to solve. And these marketing teams, even though they become centralized, are only centralized within their one platform, and they're just creating more noise against each other instead of having a cohesive strategy somehow of what a cable provider used to do, which give you a cohesive strategy and tell you what to watch, regardless of how many channels they have. They can have one platform there. We're missing that part of the universe right now. Yeah, definitely. I mean, just going back to Peacock, the way they're advertising now is they're basically just advertising buckets of shows. Like, here's our sizzle with our medicine shows. Here's our sizzle with our crime shows. And I'm like, this isn't okay, but that's not. No, like, you need a more coherent strategy, like you said, that sort of plays into sort of helping people find the content, not just listing. Like, everyone's just all into the sort of the BuzzFeed-esque listicles of like, here's all the content we have on our platform that's in this one bucket, and that. Well, if the direction's coming from Comcast in Philadelphia, I'm honestly not surprised that's how they're doing their marketing. I've been in some of those rooms where people create those buckets, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So, that bucket mentality to think like, oh, we're the place for a certain genre seems to have always been a little bit of their language out there. I guess I'm not too surprised if that's the way it's going to look. To me, I think it's I'd be curious to see how it's really going to play out. Are they going to, really trying to replicate what their competitors are doing, or just recognize, hey, we're really the location for everything. Because it has to be part of Comcast strategy, and Comcast is a cable provider. I can see really Peacock being an OTT cable provider and not really caring about owning all the content along the way, because they could be a place for secondary or ongoing content.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting idea, because with all the cord cutting that's happening, Peacock has a lot of, NBC Universal has a lot of channels under its umbrella. There's a lot of things you can watch and not need to be hooked up to the cable side of it.
Yeah.
Maybe the answer to that. I do think you're right. I think all these platforms need to figure out what they're going to do and what their strategy is versus just being another OTT service. And I think that they all kind of have to figure out how they're going to play this game and take some lessons from what Netflix is doing right and what Netflix is doing wrong, and try to figure out a way to make it work for their business and all the content they have available.
Yeah, and I read an article this week where ESPN is struggling because they're the darling of cable providers, but as cable subscribers shrink, they're losing that revenue stream.
Yeah.
And they know that if they flip straight to direct competitor, then they're basically off like their $10 billion a month, cash cow that they're sitting on top of as cable providers. So it's something like ESPN, you can see Peacock maybe playing nice in a certain way of saying, giving ESPN a future home as in a streaming platform and not worrying about the competition of it. ESPN can obviously handle it. They're part of the Disney universe. They can figure that thing out. But I feel like ESPN always sits outside. Like ABC and ESPN always sit outside looking for viewers for sports. Like they're winning in that space. And they should be agnostic, not care where someone's watching their stuff, as long as someone's watching ESPN.
Yeah, exactly.
So pretty interesting. We'll see how that plays out. Clearly, these big shifts are taking place every single week, and it's great to be able to process and find this stuff. I love the Wednesday afternoon text messages I get from you where you're like mid-discovery, like, are these people watching our show because that's
what I said this week. I was like, see, we talked about this. I knew this was going to happen. Look how smart I am. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not that ego. Please don't think I'm that big of an ego guy. I'm not. Just remember what Tim said. I'm a good all-around guy.
You're a good all-around. And truly one of the industry's leading consultants when it comes to marketing. So you got to be able to play.
Yeah, I'll take that title. I'll take that.
All right. Well, that's my hit list for this week. I still, League of Legends championships happening tomorrow afternoon. So at one point we have to jump over to the video game space, because talking about millions of viewers that we're not even talking about, and it's real content. It's not, nobody's sitting around guessing what that stuff is. People are tuning in. They know what it is. They're rooting for their favorite teams. And that's just the beginning of that stuff. So those of you in the gaming space, we know that you're out there. We hear your voice, and we'll get to it. We just, I guess we just lean towards what our buddies are telling us on a week-by-week basis. We'll get there eventually. Keith, thanks again. Another great week. I look forward to next week's poster. I'm kind of concerned when you start running out. You're going to have to get on eBay and start.
Oh, Tim, it's going to take me a long time to run out. Trust me. There might be a few randos thrown in there, but I'm not going to run out for quite some time.
If you run out, I know a hallway full of posters sitting in Philadelphia. Maybe we can call those guys and ask to borrow some of their movies posters.
Yeah, maybe.
Chernobyl, that poster's right there. How can you not grab it?
Yeah, it's true.
All right, my friend, thank you again. And thank you, Lydia, for supporting us behind the scenes. We appreciate the work that you're doing for us on social media, getting the word out there. Those of you who love our show, been watching it week by week, we appreciate you. Please subscribe to our channel. We'll be able to make more content for you and get that out to you sooner. And of course, Ethan, always the guy editing this stuff behind the scenes. Thanks for being part of what the support and the RevThink team support that you guys are doing out there. Keith, I can't tell you how much I look forward to this. So hopefully next Friday comes sooner than later. There's going to be an election between now and next Friday. So we might or might have something more to talk about than
Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
when that time comes. But until the Civil War begins, I appreciate you, and I look forward to doing more of this.
Nice. Way to end on a happy note.
All right. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.